All right. Good morning, everybody, or afternoon, or good evening, or good night, which way you're watching the video. So there's been a lot of discussion, and I've done multiple videos, and Bill here, who we'll get to in a second, has done a bunch of videos about the different editions and how Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast has been handling that. And it kind of all, for me, started back when the OGL scandal took place, and I think we all remember that one. We don't need to go off on that tangent. But I think there's two things going on. Number one, Hasbro is, of course, trying to bring new players into the game because old players aren't going to be around forever. So they want the next generation to embrace the game. So they're trying to do that. But one thing I think they're failing at miserably is trying to bring the older players like myself and Bill together along with the newer groups and say, hey, look, let's get these two groups to get along. Can't we all just get along? And I think they're kind of driving a wedge in between those two groups. And I used to think it was not on purpose, and I'm kind of on the fence of is it on purpose or not. I think it might be. But I posted a couple of videos on it. Bill had some comments, so I thought I would have him on and let him have his say. So, by the way, his channel is a Dungeon Delver. If you don't subscribe to it on YouTube, you should. Great stuff. I'm in his Tuesday night first edition game. So, with that, I will let Bill take it away.
Well, thank you, Tim. And thanks once again for having me on. Um, I want to preface this by saying I did my time in the trenches on Edition Wars, and honestly, I don't give a shit what anybody plays.
I don't
Play,
either.
love, enjoy D&D. I kid about it, right? I mean, there's the Dungeon Delver kayfabe where I'm like, God dang it, you play first edition or you're not playing. Play what you love, play what you enjoy. If you ask me what I love and what I enjoy and why, or why I don't like another given edition, I will tell you. But if I had spent all that time in the early 2000s writing more than I already was instead of edition warring, I could probably have self-published 20 damn D&D modules.
Well,
So
for
none of what I'm about to say.
well, for me, it's bring me to the table with good players. I'll play either edition, any other editions. I don't so.
Precisely so. So none of what I'm about to say should be construed by anyone as an attack on you, your table, your DMing style, what you do, how you do it. Um, and I told Tim before we started, I've got three main bullet points that I want to touch on. And the first is what Hasbro wants, what Wizards of the Coast wants, what Hasbro wants. They're as inseparable as the cerebellum and the cerebrum. They are. So if I say Hasbro and then I say Wizards of the Coast, I'm talking about the same entities. Um, they are all part of the body corporate. Uh, what what Hasbro, WotC want is the Games Workshop business model. And the Games Workshop business model is not sell people hyper expensive models, change the edition every 18 months. That's nice, and it is a function of the business model, much as your water pump is the function or is a functionary part of your car's engine. Um, the Games Workshop business model is this: attract a young and preferably adolescent player. They have no income of their own. Well, how is that a business model, Bill? You might ask. They got to go to mom and dad. Mom and dad have the money. Mom and dad will do whatever they can to keep their little entitled child happy. So mom and dad have a bottomless purse. All they know is little Johnny said he wants the blue marine guys because they're the best, because that's what the neckbeard at the Games Workshop store said. Okay, fine. Well, I need paints, and they sell the paints at the Games Workshop store. Fine. I need glue. They sell the glue at the Games Workshop store. Fine. I need this magazine. This magazine that comes out every month called White Dwarf has all the updates for my army. Fine. And they spend and they spend and they spend and they spend. And they do this from when they're about 11 until they're about 15. And when they hit 15, their tastes turn to other things. Uh, dating, socializing, hanging out with their friends. So the army, which is almost certainly either badly, partially, or not at all painted, and the paints, which will dry up in 18 months, that all gets packed away because it's nerdy stuff that gets put on a shelf in the closet. and it gets forgotten. What these kids don't do is they don't stick around for years on saying, you know what? The 8th edition codex for Tyranids was the best, to the other kids coming into the hobby at the Games Workshop store or at the FLGS that sells GW stuff or at the GW authorized conventions. They don't show up with an army that's not sold anymore and convince people, hey, you should just go on eBay. You can get this thing for like, you know, a tenth of the price is what you'd pay. And this old army and these older sculpts are really cool. They hate that kind of customer. They don't want that kind of customer. They just want churn. They want you in at 11, out by 15 before you have discretionary income and can make guided, careful, considerate decisions about what you're going to spend money on and convince younger people to do. I have up here, I have Space Hulk. GW doesn't make that anymore. The 2nd edition is behind it. If you ask me what I like about 40K, it's that and that alone. And if somebody says, well, I can't get that, hey, no problem. You can find PDFs of the rules knocking around, or people are selling the rule books on eBay, and you can pick up some proxy miniatures. And hey, you're playing the best GW. They hate guys like me, and they don't want to breed more guys like me. They want that short shock of cash, and then they want you to put your army in a closet and sell it on eBay 5 or 6 years later, or preferably throw it away because they don't want that coming back.
Well, actually, I'm in my early 50s, and I've had a number of people come up to me and say, "Oh yeah, you play? You want my old D&D stuff?" Like I've had people gift me boxes full of stuff that they just don't want anymore.
Same. Most of what I have behind me is stuff that people have literally been like, I got no use for this anymore, and they give it to me. So that would, if Hasbro woke up tomorrow as a corporate entity, and that was what people were doing, playing D&D for 3 years, never looking back on previous editions, never sticking around to tell people how awesome 5th was and they don't need 6, Hasbro would be over the moon. If they could just figure out the FOMO of GW's minis, then it would be perfect. But they kind of already got that with Magic the Gathering. So that is the model. The GW model is what they want. But
well, it makes perfect sense, because that's what they tried to do with 4th edition, right? Was turn 4th edition D&D into Magic the Gathering, because it was more of a card game, and nobody liked it. They're like, well, if I'm going to do that, I'll just play Magic. And then 5th edition came out and went back to something closer to the old. I mean, it was a lot different, but it was no longer a card game. So it was still essentially at its core the same game with a bunch of ancillary stuff hanging off the edges. And they changed the armor system completely. But
as I said, when I play tested 5e, and I have played some 5e, it's got good bones. It's a fine RPG. It has suffered from feature creep. Now, this may blow some of the viewers or listeners' minds. 5th edition is 10 years old. 5th edition has hung around. It's not new. This is the point in AD&D's creation when the Wilderness Survival Guide and Dungeoneer Survival Guide were coming out, guys. Because AD&D hit with the Monster Manual, the first Monster Manual, in 77. Gary was gone in 85.
Yeah.
So 86, 87, that one, that's the one. Oh, yeah. 86, 87, D&D, AD&D was getting long in the tooth. I mean, other than selling the original collector's editions like that one up there,
which they've got a 50th anniversary edition coming out, right? Which has all the first edition stuff in it, which
sort of kind of that's another bone to pick. The 40th anniversary was actually a usable, playable version of OD&D, and it came in this big honking wood monolith here. My gaming group got me this for a birthday gift in 2014, and I'm forever grateful. But so that is, I'm not even going to try and put that back right now. That is what there is an edition march. It happens. So Setting aside OD&D and various flavors of basic, uh, when AD&D came out, Gary said, you should play AD&D. It's all the supplements from OD&D, all the stuff we put in the strategic review, articles that I sent to magazines that weren't even TSR that you might have never seen, things that were in tournament adventures that you guys might have never seen. It's all in a convenient place, and it is therefore better because it's three nigh indestructible hardback books. And I don't say that as like that's some hyperbole of Gary's. I have now going on 40-year-old books. Tim just held up one that came out in 1977. I have that same monster manual up here, that same printing. They made them to last.
Yeah, they were not kidding around when they put that together.
Indeed, and granted, some people didn't. Some people said, "No, I think this is too much. You know, there's a way to just keep it with 120 pages total of the three brown booklets," and they didn't. Well, when
Yeah, I mean, I
Gary,
learned to play in this one, right?
yeah,
Everything you actually need to play the game is in this book. You don't need
indeed,
all that.
indeed, but they even had additional editions of that.
Yeah.
But there was so Gary was there. Now Gary was planning on a second edition, you know expanded and in places more refined AD&D. So my fellow grognards, I speak to you now from Radio Free Delver. Don't sit and think that if Gary had stayed that we would still today be playing first edition AD&D. We'd if Gary was still with us and Gary had retained control of TSR, we'd be playing fifth edition or sixth edition or seventh edition or whatever Gary had cooked up. It would have continued forward, but I digress. What so
It'd be a different fifth edition than we have today,
it
for
would
sure.
it would be a vastly different
But even
edition.
Gary, and this is something else the community goes crazy about. I think even Gary early on saw the potential of other media, of other ways to play. And I'm convinced that if he was around today, he'd be somewhere involved in the virtual tabletop world where he was trying to figure
Oh,
out how to put this online.
yeah, Gary wanted Dungeons and Dragons to be a multimedia hit. When he went out to California to run D&D Entertainment, he was courting TV executives, movie executives. You can go back to early copies of Dragon magazine, and Dragon and TSR put advertisements. Hey, can you code AppleSoft Basic? Can you code Commodore Basic? Send us, we have projects. So it was there from almost day one. Tonight on my live stream, well, if you're watching this at some point in the future, that might not mean anything, but in the future, after this video this afternoon on a live stream, I'm going to be demoing the Mattel Dungeons and Dragons Electronic Labyrinth game. That was a 1981 product that TSR licensed to Mattel. But the point is, there was a second edition, and Gary politely advised TSR, and he was not with them at this point. If you guys put this out, this is going to alienate about half of your customers because they're not going to want to move forward. They're going to want to stick with the edition that they like. And of course, they didn't listen to them, and there was a drop off of players. And it is the proof is in the fact that shop owners and wholesalers we're still getting orders from shop owners and customers, respectively, for Unearthed Arcana and the 1E Player's Handbook. People still wanted those, even though second edition was riding tall in the saddle, and they kept those going well into 1990. They kept printing those and selling them wholesale to
So
retailers.
so
So
Unearthed Arcana. So let's dive into the history of that one, just because things do change over time. Unearthed Arcana, what was that when it was originally put out, essentially?
Unearthed Arcana was a bunch of Dragon magazine articles and stuff scraped up from modules that was slapped together to save TSR.
Well, yeah, but so it put out this thing that was actually stuff that was put together other places. So this repackaging of stuff is not new. It's like the
No.
the image behind me is deities and demigods, right? That thing's been through what, a number of edition changes thanks to the Cthulhu
Mm.
argument. There's a whole bunch of different versions of that thing running around. Um, it but it these sort of addition changes, even when Gary was around, they went on and the game expanded and the game changed and they said, okay, this isn't quite working right, let's shift it around to be that, because some
I
of the
mean,
first
this
edition rules weren't really explained all that well, and I think version 2 kind of fixed a whole bunch of that. And truth
that's
be known, even like your first edition game, which I'm in on Tuesday nights, is really, it's a first edition game, but it sort of plays like a second edition game. Maybe that's because you're a really good DM, but it's essentially those early editions kind of, there's gray areas in between them, right? It's not really like
mm,
first edition's a clean break over to second. It sort of is a fuzzy line in between those two. Uh,
it is, and a lot of people say that. But I was just gonna. This is deities and demigods for OD&D, and it was written by the same guys who wrote the hardback deities and demigods. It's gods, demigods, and heroes by Jim Ward, may he rest in peace, and Rob Kuntz. So yes,
right.
it has been through multiple revisions. But so what you're saying about the similarities between second edition and first edition, a lot of people saw no reason to change. They didn't
Mhm.
like the changes that came, and they saw no reason to change. And so they felt they got left behind, or if they kept buying first edition or stuff into second edition, they immediately converted it back to the edition they were comfortable with. TSR made no hugely compelling article or argument rather, other than, look, we're not printing the old stuff anymore. If you want to keep buying new D&D stuff, you're going to buy second edition. Um, Along came Wizards of the Coast in 1998 and immediately started working on basically fusing Ars Magica with the six stat system of D&D, and that's how we got the D20 system. And their argument was the same thing. Well, you should play this because it's better. Um, and then 7 years later, because second edition or third edition came out in 2000. In 2007, they released 4E, and their big argument for playing this, uh, well, their ads were positioned as those ironic, you know, uh, we're going to insult you. We're going to make you like it by insulting you for liking the old stuff, because it's extreme and it's radical, man, and whatever.
Yeah.
But also, you should play it because it's newer and I guess it's better.
Well,
So,
also fourth edition was largely different because it was mechanicked on a card game essentially. And like Magic the Gathering, you can buy your way into victory if you go spend enough money on cards or buy rare ones or special packages or whatever. You can essentially buy a winning character at that point. And
yes,
that to me bothered me, at least as a player, because I want to start a character at level 1 and work him up to level until wherever he dies. If that's him going to the immortal rules, that's him going into the immortal rules. If that's him dying at level 3, okay, he got whacked at level 3. I'll build a new character. And that's kind
sure.
of the fun.
And when 5e came out, their big pitch for 5e was, we are really, really sorry. We're really, really sorry for 4e. But also you should buy this because I don't know, it's better and stuff.
Well,
So the argument,
the one thing about fifth edition that bothers me, and I think it bothers you too, and I'd love to get your opinion on this, is
okay.
that in first and second and third and whatever the earlier editions you played, my characters could conceivably die pretty effectively and not that uncommonly, right? You can get killed off pretty quick. Fifth
Mhm.
edition, it's tougher to get killed. There's a whole lot of saving throws and resurrections and other stuff that basically give me superpowers, and I
The
can take
bounce
a lot of
back,
risks that I couldn't take back in the earlier games.
yeah, the bounce back system in 5e, the 3 death saves and all that jazzmatazz, makes you fairly more resilient than. And it wasn't like that when I play tested it. There were no multiple death saves or anything like that. That was something they added later. I mean, I remember when the community blew up because they were going to add something where even if you missed, you could still do minimum damage on a miss, and it was a terrible idea. Look, if you miss, but it's like they were trying to remove any bad consequences because that wouldn't be fun. But their arguments all the way going back to the shift from OD&D to first edition AD&D, all the way up to the shift from 4E to 5E, and Essentials, if you count that as a core part of fourth edition, was play the new edition because we think it's better. And they're putting the onus back on the players to make a judgment about whether or not the edition is better. And now, Tim, now you might want to grab your Reynolds wrap and do a double layer, because we got to get foil hatted here. I have said that what happened in 2003, started happening in 2003, did not happen in a vacuum. And one thing that you have expressed to me that is true is that corporations they're not agile.
No,
Even me.
and the bigger the Titanic's moves turn slowly, right? They don't sink all at
Yeah.
once. They don't float all at once. Big things don't turn on a dime, right?
And I mean, I kidded yesterday. I put up on Twitter my org chart, just a rectangle with my name, the Dungeon Delver, in it, right? That's my org chart. Even I can't just, at the very least, it takes me 5 or 10 minutes to get my studio going to do a video. But so cast your mind back to January, that second week or third week of January in 2003, when the new OGL leaks came out. The noise over that drowned out something that happened on January 2nd. It was a PBS NewsHour hit piece aimed at lovers of classic D&D. Why won't these guys change? We're going to investigate that. Why would PBS give a damn about who still plays old original D&D? But the crux, the thesis of this piece was that many people don't want to leave classic D&D because they are racists, because they are sexists.
See, I've read many of those books cover to cover, and I don't get that one, right? I
Well,
see that once in a while, but
I agree with you. They got dragged on social media by many people in the TTRPG space over this.
Mhm.
And they unpinned their tweet, they let it drop, they changed the title. Well, no, initially they didn't change the title. They just created a new tweet and pinned it again, got ratioed. They changed the title, unpinned that tweet, pinned it with the new title, got ratioed again. People locked onto them and were not letting them go. I don't believe for a second, I don't believe for a nanosecond that one writer at PBS said, I'm going to do a news hour on this. Boss, is this cool with you? Sure. Take some camera gear. You could no more convince me of that than you could convince me that I can flap my arms and fly to the moon, that Wizards of the Coast didn't have a hand in that. I smell them in that. And that brings us to the true foil hattery. Wizards of the Coast's new pitch for 6E, because it's current year and the environment out there is the way it is, will be play the new edition. The old editions are full of sexists and racists. And if you don't believe me, look at what guys like Kyle Brink said last year. White people can't leave this hobby fast enough. The 30 seconds at the end of the talk about that 500-page OD&D book that's supposed to come out this spring of, well, Dave and Gary were a couple of cis white men from the Midwest, and we have to do better than that. They are absolutely, their sales pitch in current year is not going to be, well, play it because we think it's better, because that, again, that puts it in our hands that we can decide that. So you don't want to be seen committing wrong thing by playing an edition written by bad people, do you?
Well, I think one of the things they're going to push this year is they're going to come up with some way to sell it, right? That's just beyond. I mean, they've got marketing teams that I mean, I run a company and their marketing budget is probably bigger than the entire budget of my company. And so let's face it, they have money to market however which way they want to.
Mhm.
But one of the things I think they're going to push for is I like having the physical books so that I can look something up and do whatever I want to do. I think there's going to be a larger push towards an online subscription model because it's like anything where you have, like take World of Warcraft or any other of the larger video games now.
Oh
You
yeah.
don't really own it. You pay a monthly subscription to be able to play it, right? And I have a feeling that because of the history of some of the corporate execs coming out of the video game industry and a couple of them coming out of the software as a service industry, I think you're going to see, yeah, okay, we'll print some physical media books to keep some people quiet. But I think there's going to be a lot of additional stuff. Like we used to get dungeon modules all the time, like little fold out ones that
Hmm.
the kid, I was the kid with a paper route who would save his money to go buy the latest adventure
There you go.
module.
Like Grit
Um,
magazine.
and now they're in hardback. You can get them for somewhere between 25 and $50 on Amazon, right? Okay, fine. Fifth edition is fifth edition, and I can still get a module for $25 when they're on sale, and I watch for sales. But I think what they're going to do from a company perspective, and I wouldn't be surprised to see this with One DnD, is to do a lot more push for an online presence where you pay them $10 a month, but you pay it to them every month. For because speaking as a business owner, that recurring revenue that's highly predictable is really nice, right? So that you don't have to worry about surges in sales around Christmas and other times. You just have this nice predictable level of income, and that makes your planning and whatnot from a business perspective easier. And if you look at the history of some of the executives, that's kind of where they made their career, right? Is in that space. So I don't have any inside info that says that's what they're going to do, but it sure it looked if I were them and that was where I made my career, you always go to what you know. And it sure, if you look at the leadership team, it sure looks and smells like that's kind of where they're pushing.
Yeah, that's definitely the push. And Cox said mid last year that the aim is that books, dice, and miniatures will be boutique items that weirdos, he didn't say weirdos, but come on, we all know he was thinking it, that weirdos will buy, that the common D&D player will just have their $10 a month D&D Beyond subscription where they can year zero anything that they later decide doesn't fit. And in fact, some people who bought D&D Beyond books. I think it was Tasha's something or the other that came out last
The
year.
Cauldron one, yeah, that
Yeah,
had some AI
literally
art in it. I think I've got it.
went to bed on Friday
Yeah.
and Monday data in it was changed. Like character options and stuff had been changed. And that's, of course, that's going to play hell. If you, Tim, have D&D Beyond and your player's handbook is on D&D Beyond and you're sitting there at the table scrolling through the phone, Bill, the weirdo who has all the physical books, starts telling you about class limitations and advantage, and you say, and you show me on your phone because it got a patch was
Mhm.
released,
Right.
then, who's right?
So, and it's like Chris Cox, or was it the guy from Wizards of the Coast? I don't remember which one. Said something about half races are going to go away. And one of the things I actually
Yeah,
kind of like in fifth edition is you can play Dragonborn, which is like part dragon, part humanoid.
yeah, half dragon, half person.
Right. And they're like, oh no, those are going to go away. I'm like, because they're inherently racist, which I thought was weird that a half
Yeah.
race would be racist, but okay. What happens when we have a whole group of people that kind of are getting used to playing like in the first edition game we've got on Tuesday nights, there's a half orc,
Mm-hmm.
right? And we just defeated another half orc last night. What happens when we decide, oh, half orcs go away, but you've got a character you've been playing for 15 years that happens to be half orc, and that comes with its own special set of abilities and characteristics and traits, and now, oh, that's gone, and I
Yeah,
can't do it in the online session anymore.
exactly. Flip the script. You're in uh you have the physical books. I'm the DM. You're running the half work and you show up for the game on Tuesday night. It's a face-to-face game. And suddenly I'm looking at you and telling you your character has literally been Thanos snapped out of existence because, it's wrong think. And our lords and masters in Renton have decided that, two different species can't love each other. Um, I'm sorry, two different races. I'm not playing their game. Two different races, can't love each other and have a child together. So I yeah, that all feeds into what I was saying. And the third point that I'll make, and this is a little bit black pilled, but it's also a little bit tongue in cheek. They're waiting for people like me to die. When I'm gone, or leave the hobby, whatever. I decide I want to, you know, build a canoe and paddle down you know,
Become a
the
surfer dude.
coast or something like that. Yeah, become a surfer dude here in Florida. Yeah, I'd become a surfer dude. Yeah, our rivers are not so great, very mosquito-y. But anyway, whatever it
Too many
is,
crocodiles with it.
however, uh, I go away, they can't wait for me to go away. Every every person who leaves goes back all the way into that model that they want. I'm not out there. I'm not going to free RPG day with an armload of AD&D books saying we can play the classic version. I have never run a game of OD&D or AD&D, Tim, where people said, well, that sucked. Quite the
Well,
opposite. The
it's
response is always, this is a fantastic game. I love it that I don't have to worry about what's on the sheet and I can just interact with you and concentrate on having fun. And I tell them, go to Drive Through RPG. You can buy these rules, and they're very happy.
mhm.
So when a
Yeah,
guy like me is no longer doing that, that's a little bit more profit back for them.
that's true. And I think that's what pushed the OGL scandal. And I'm convinced we haven't heard the end of that one. Where they were trying to revoke everybody's license to go off and do these things. There's just a lot of small companies that have popped up around time and are making accessories to go with D&D essentially royalty free, and they're trying to sell it cheap enough so that people can afford it. So of course that limits their profitability, but with any kind of royalty, it would knock them right out of the game. And I'm convinced Hasbro's not done with that, or Wizards of the Coast is not done with that yet. There's going to be some creeping death. They're going to come at it little one paragraph at a time here and there and just inch it until it essentially is gone. But I could be wrong about that, but I don't think I am.
I honestly don't think you are either. And something you and I have talked about is so Goodman Games puts out these, and I've talked about these before. Um, they're classics revisited. They're these massive hardbound volumes that are classic.
Like that one.
Yeah, there you go. They've done most of the really classic basic modules and a bunch of the classic AD&D modules. They haven't touched the GDQ series or the A series yet, but
Mhm.
I also don't know that they're going to, because I think and this dropped a little bit ago, and I mentioned this on my show. They're now, that is, Wizards of the Coast is now doing a fifth edition version of the Lost Caverns of Sochconth. And if you are a fan of AD&D, it is just as uh, as wonky as you might imagine. It's completely defanged.
Yeah, and they're
And
actually coming out with a version of Expedition to Barrier Peaks also in the next month or so, I think. There's a version of that coming out.
mhm,
And so I think what they did was kind of so for people that don't know the OGL, and let me put my weird business hat on for a minute. The Open Gaming License, which now is called Creative Commons or something like that, it gives people non-exclusive rights to do something. So yes, Goodman Games can go do this, but they're not exclusive. They can't do it all by themselves. They can't be the only one. They have to have other people can have the right to do the same thing. At some extent, that's oversimplifying it, but essentially that's it. So I think what Hasbro has done, or Wizards of the Coast has done, is said, "Hey, wow, Goodman Games is really onto something there, and they're making a pretty good amount of money. Let's do that too, right?" And now they can come in and undercut the price of what Goodman Games can do because they're a lot smaller. And this is a $50 book or something, 49.99. But most of the stuff I'm getting from Wizards of the Coast, the hardback stuff is like 25 bucks. So I think what's going to happen is hey, great, thank you for doing our market research for us, and there is a market for that. We'll do it too, and we'll undercut your price. And now Goodman Games has a real problem in that they can't do this and make any money at it anymore.
well, let me show you something here. This is Goodman Games store. Okay. The company that makes this is their store page. I just searched for, and I don't know if that's something you have to do, Tim,
No, you
if
got
you
it.
can see that. Yeah. Search results, Expedition of the Barrier Peaks. No products were found matching your selection. Let's look for Keep on the Borderlands.
These are now out of print, and you can get them on eBay, but now they're going for $100 a pop instead of 50
Yeah.
bucks a pop.
Keep on the Borderlands. Nope. So there you go, guys. The shoe has already dropped. So, was that a case of Goodman just deciding that they wanted to press ahead with their own stuff, or was that Wizards of the Coast saying, we'll just be taking that license back? And I think it is definitely the latter.
That's something like that.
I
All
mean,
right. Well, before we get too deep into, well, I think that's a good one for us to leave it on. But if you want to tell either of us we're incorrect on something, argue with either of us, scream at either of us, I think we both are usually willing to answer most comments. I don't always answer all of them. I do answer the
mostly.
polite ones, but I am notorious for blocking people that fall into the asshole category. So if you want to be a dick, go ahead. But I'm likely to block you, and both of us will go living on happy lives after that, I'm sure. But I'm willing to discuss with just anybody. And I think the game, I think Dungeons and Dragons as a whole has a great future, but I think Hasbro has a limited window of opportunity to kind of unite the older gamers like Bill and myself with the newer ones, because I'm open to it. I don't mind playing fifth edition, but there's just a whole lot of weird stuff that's going on, and like with all the online things transition, if they start transitioning my characters out of existence, that's kind of a problem for me. So um let's hope that doesn't happen.
Indeed.
But I'll link to his channel as well, and we'll hope to see you guys in the next video. And check out Tuesday night's live stream. It's always fun. All right. Thank you, everybody.